Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, now let's have a nice warm welcome for our main speaker, Yvonne.
Hi, my name is Yvonne Schulte, and I am an alcoholic. I would like to thank Jody. Where'd you go? Hi. I'd like to thank Jody for inviting me to come over here. That's funny. I usually say up or down or just over a mile over here and share with you all tonight. You'll hear, if you hear nothing else, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're new, I would like to welcome you, and I want you to know that that I didn't walk into Alcoholics Anonymous and fall in love. In fact, I hated AA. Absolutely hated it. It was horrible and boring, and that's it just occurred to me too. Out here on the West Coast, I got sober on the East Coast and in the DC metropolitan area, and there are hardly any speaker meetings there at all. And I think that, at least out here I get to be entertained with some of these crazy stories in Alcoholics Anonymous. But and what a powerful message Scarlett has. What a great job. Thank you so much for coming, and I'd like to thank Leilani and Margie for their support also. But where I got sober, the meetings are usually you just sit in a circle and you kind of share where you're at for the day. And it was like the most hideous thing. And I hated it from my first meeting, which was when I was 13 years old. So I hear people share frequently, and I believe them. I know that this is a story for many, many people, but I hear a lot of people say that they came to Alcoholics Anonymous and they just felt like they were home, and that's not my story. I hated it. I never felt like I fit in here. I didn't want to fit in here. I thought there was something definitely wrong with you guys. I couldn't imagine why. I couldn't imagine why anyone would even want to be sober, really. I kind of knew that that's what AA was for, and I wasn't really interested in any of that. But I'll tell you that my experience here, though, is that it doesn't matter what I think or how I feel about Alcoholics Anonymous or the actions I'm asked to take. The only thing that matters here is that I take those actions. And thankfully, I got involved in a very busy home group when I was new, and they trained my feet sober, and my mind followed much, much later. But I'm going to tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I was born in Los Angeles, and I have a completely normal family. They're wonderful. My mother passed away a few years ago, but when she died, her and my father had been married 38 years, which is great because my mom was 58 when she passed away. So, my family is Roman Catholic, and I was raised in a very good and religious home that was based on morals and values, and I was taught the difference between right and wrong growing up, and my mother was one of those. I can't say a bad word about my mother. My mother was just sweet. She would help anybody. My mother had one resentment her entire life. Naturally, she operated without resentment. I've never understood that because I've been resentful since I was a little girl. And I'll tell you, the one resentment she had was about a person that she felt had wronged me. The truth was, actually, I explained to her much later because she was talking about it on her deathbed, and I was saying, Mom, Mom, it was really my fault because I was doing drugs at the time, and but no, they still shouldn't have. It was great. I was just raised, my my mother she was just loving and just would do anything for me, and would help me in any way, and I was still raised I wasn't raised. I was raised well, but from the time I was little, I just felt separate from everybody. I felt separate from my family. From an early age, I felt separate from God, the God I was raised with. I felt separate from all the other little kids in my life. And Scarlett talked about having that gaping hole in her gut, and I experienced that. And finally, when I started to hear speakers in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first thing I related to was that feeling of separation. And I read in our literature one time the best description for the way I felt my entire life, which was anxious apartness. And when I read that anxious apartness, I knew that summed up in 2 words the way I lived my life. And I too operated everything I did was based on fear. Every action I took was definitely based on fear for me. And but I was raised in this great family, and I just never really felt like I fit in with other kids. And I had my first. My sister got me drunk for the first time when I was 4 years old, and my sister's 8 years older than me, so she was 12 at the time. And my sister, I wanted to be just like my sister when I grew up. I remember like being 4 years old and just thinking my sister was just the coolest thing. By the time she was 12, she had hit 5'10.5", and I'd always wanted to be tall. and it didn't happen, in case you hadn't noticed. But she's 5'10.5". She has blonde hair and green eyes, and my sister always she hung out with these big surfer guys, and she would hang out either down at Venice Beach or in Hollywood. And my sister just lived this life that was really exciting. And I remember at the age, it's funny, I have a 12-year-old now, but when I was 4, 12 just seemed so old, you know? And she just seemed so mature. And she had to babysit me a lot, so she would take me to parties with her. And like I said, I had my first drunk when I was 4 years old, and she used to take me to these parties, and she would tell all these guys, she would say, "My little sister can drink you all under the table." And they would laugh, I'm sure. I don't know. I don't remember, but I do remember that they would give me beer. And I would start drinking that beer. And our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about in the doctor's opinion that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And if you had asked me that then, I don't know if I could have put words to it at 4, but but I loved the effect produced by alcohol. I loved getting drunk when I was 4 years old. Alcohol was magic for me, and it felt like, you know, very similar to my other favorite thing when I was little, which was spinning in circles until you got so dizzy you fell down. You know, alcohol was just like that, but more. And it was great. I loved it. And I would drink anytime, you know, from that age on, I was compulsively after alcohol, really. My father, he would drink Bud Light or Miller Light, I think it was. He would just sit on the porch after a long day's work and have that one beer can. I'd sneak up behind him and try to, you know, get some, or he would let me have a sip. And my mother had a glass of wine before bed every night, and I would always beg her for sips. And I loved alcohol. And my sister's one of those. When she was 12, she went through that big, crazy kind of teenage party phase, and she was way out of control. She would run away from home. My mother just pulled her hair out, worrying about my sister all the time. And when my sister was about, I guess, 16 years old, she went into one of those Scared Straight teenage rehab programs where they, you know, isolate the teenagers somewhere in another state for a year and a half or so. And my sister was literally scared straight. And I identified my sister in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, upon reading it. And our book describes her type as a certain type of hard drinker who, if given a good enough reason, is able to stop or moderate. Now, when my sister was a teenager, she looked like a problem drinker. She looked much the same as I did in the years after that. But my sister was able to have a major life-changing experience, was able to quit drinking for a number of years, and ever since then, she's been able to drink like a gentleman. You know, my sister is not an alcoholic. And I'll tell you that my sister's experience colored the way my family felt about problems with drugs and alcohol, frankly. And I wanted, you know, much later, as you'll hear, I tried many times. I thought I could just do it like my sister, you know, that if something traumatic enough happened, that I would be able to get a grip on how frequently I drank, and then it would just all kind of settle down. And that's not how it worked for me, but I sure chased that for a while. I was 9 years old when my sister went into that program, and I didn't have access to liquor anymore. And I know that after that one of the first times I drank on my own was when I was 11, and I was in 6th grade, and I spent the weekend at my girlfriend Heather Smith's house, and she had some 6th graders over for the weekend, and her parents were out of the country, and her high school sisters were babysitting us, and I don't remember what Heather and the girls were doing, but the older sisters were getting loaded, and I went up to them and I said, I could drink you all under the table. And they laughed at me, but they gave me a liter of 7 and 7. And somewhere in that bottle, I have no idea what happened. The next day, they told me that I did finish that liter, but I can't tell you anything that happened that night. The only thing that I know is that when I woke up in the morning, I was on the cold, hard basement floor. It was Virginia. It was cold. I was on that cold, hard basement floor in my training bra. I found my clothes on the top floor, and I had urinated in them sometime during the night. Now that's how I drank when I was 11, and I've never been a social drinker. Frankly, I don't even understand why anyone would. I've been thinking lately about that matching wine with salmon thing. I just, I'm not interested in, the right tastes going together. When I drink alcohol, I want to feel something. Alcohol does something for me, and I don't really understand any other type of drinking but for the effect produced by alcohol, and I love that. I would drink. I didn't have much opportunity to get drunk when I was 11, but I did drink every opportunity I had, and within a few years, I could get those college guys across the street to buy for me, or when I finally got my driver's license, I could drive into Southeast DC. And you can find the places that'll sell it to you, and it was wonderful. But again, my life was I lived this life, and I would get drunk from time to time. But the rest of my life, from all outside appearances, I was a normal kid. But I just never felt right. And when I was in high school, I got involved in our drama department, and for the first time, I thought, what, I finally understand what my problem is. One of my first serious major resentments was that my parents had moved us to Fairfax, Virginia when I was about 8 years old, I think, and I just thought, Fairfax, I don't know how you move from Los Angeles to Fairfax. It just, and since I was introduced to the drama department, I realized that I was an artist. I'm an actress. And, of course, I wouldn't ever feel like I fit in with people from Fairfax, Virginia. I knew that if I could just move to New York City, that I would find my people and I would fit in. And so I took every opportunity I could to get up there. And I finally got to New York City when I was 17 years old. And I studied at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. And I studied at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute through that school. And I'll tell you, it was an amazing thing for a girl like me at 17 years old, and my mother would have thought I would have appreciated it and that I would have thrown myself into that school. But when I got to New York City, there were much more exciting things than school and acting. And those were like, nobody ID'd me anymore, so it wasn't inconvenient to go get liquor. And the clubs didn't close till 4, and then there were after-hours clubs, and then after-hours clubs, and I'd be out all night. And I had to leave NYU after one semester. And that's what my mom thought. Oh, jeez, my poor mother. That's what Leilani will tell you. I sponsor Leilani, and I always say that that's why we owe our mothers everything. There is no way in a sober lifetime. God, my mother always gets me. There's no way in a sober lifetime that I can make up what I put my mother through. All those times that she thought I was dead, or all the times she prayed that I would just be arrested so she would know where I was. I can't make that up, but I have to spend my sober life trying. In any event, I dropped out of NYU, and I couldn't maintain a job anywhere because I couldn't get to work on time. And it's a little difficult to find a job if you can't provide them references from your last job. I saw one day in the paper this ad. They were looking for cocktail waitresses and dancers at this place, and I thought that was a little weird. I didn't really quite know what it was they were looking for, but I thought I could be a cocktail waitress, and I showed up at the address, which was roughly in the neighborhood of 42nd and 8th in New York City. I had never been there before, and it was a little weird. It was called the Star Club. It didn't say that in the ad, but when I got to the address, there was one of those big neon signs with like the outline of a sexy woman, It was like the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen, really. But I walked in this place, and if I thought the outside was bad, I had never been in a strip club in my life. But if I could picture one in my mind's eye, it would look like the Star Club. It was this old, dark, dirty shotgun bar, and lights were dim, and that was a good thing because the dancers at the Star Club were past their prime. Yeah, that's what I thought. But I went in the Star Club, and I was about to turn around and walk out, and the manager, Tony, walked right up to me, and he said, he asked me if I was looking for a job. I said, I'm a cocktail waitress. He goes, not a problem. And so he asked me to start working the next night, and I left there that night just appalled. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll work there for 2 weeks because I needed money. But I thought that if I put a 2-week time limit on it, it would get me out of bed in the morning to go look for a job somewhere else, And like that's ever worked. I'll make a rule for myself. I tried that in sobriety too. It works just as well. So I walk in the next night, and Tony comes up to me and explains to me what cocktail waitresses do at the Star Club, and that is that a nice man will come sit at the bar, and I'm supposed to go sit next to him, engage him in pleasant conversation. The bartender will come over and say, "Would you like to buy the lady a drink?" That drink costs $20. It buys him 8 minutes of conversation. I get a commission off that, and hopefully he'll tip me also. So I thought that was a little weird, but I'm a talker. That first night, I go in, and one of my first customers was this young, rich, handsome Greek guy, and he bought me drinks all night, and it was perfect. Like they're not supposed to put a hand on you, but I guess that you'd probably have to tell them that or something. But he didn't he didn't even try, and he was such a gentleman. I don't know what he was doing there, but that's where he was that night, and I walked out of there with $300, and I thought, $300? Oh my God, why would I want to work here for 2 weeks? I'll be making $65,000 a year. I'm more than my parents ever made. This is great. I love the Star Club. So I went in the next night, and there wasn't a young, rich, handsome Greek guy. And at the end of the night, I was walking out of there with $60, and I was angry. Now, it would have been fine the night before if I'd made $60 a night, but now I've already calculated how much money I'm going to make, so this $60 isn't going to work for me. And Tony said to me, well, if you started dancing, you'd make more money. And no. But Tony gave me a fifth of vodka, and I became a dancer. No. I quickly discovered, my pride requires that I tell you, I quickly discovered that there is a caste system to clubs of that nature, and I ended up working at a couple of places, and my favorite place, of course, once it opened, was Scores in New York City, and I'll tell you that I had just turned 19 when I started working there, and if I could keep, if if I could be today like I was that year, I wouldn't be in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can tell you that year I felt like I had it all. I loved alcohol. I drank, but I had the right kind of drinking. Not too sloppy. It wasn't ever a problem at work. I made more money than I make today. I'm sorry to say. I was 19. I was at the 5'4" and little long red hair and just that year. That was my favorite year drinking. And, but an alcoholic of my type, I can't seem to maintain that type. I always have to mix other things into it, more drinking or what have you. And for me at the time, I liked to live with this delusion that I was still an artist. I was just kind of researching or something. And as part of my art, I like to experiment with everything that life had to offer. And I mean, things like I hitchhiked cross country to a rainbow gathering and just anything. If it sounded dangerous to me, I just wanted to experience it. And at the time, there was another dancer I worked with that used to shoot heroin from time to time. And I thought, that was about the scariest thing. Really, shooting heroin was the scariest thing that I could ever think of. But I decided that I wanted to try heroin, but not shooting it, because that's a little over the top. But so I asked my friend Katie if she would take me to go use some heroin with her, and she took me. And that night, we ran into an RN friend of hers down in Alphabet City, and we ended up at the RN's apartment, and then they pulled out the needles. And I remember Katie saying, she was talking about herself, but what she said was, if you're going to do it right. And I thought, well, that makes sense. If I'm going to try heroin one time, I ought to get the full effect of it. And what happened that night is I shot heroin for the first time, and for the next, I don't know how long, but I would think at first it was just at one time, and then it was like, maybe this is something I could do every 6 months or so. And then, there's no reason why I wouldn't be able to do it once a month, or, after that, then it's once a week. And then it's, as long as I skip the third day all the time, I can't get physically addicted. And just, that isn't true. And I want to tell you that, I always like to say, because I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want to tell you that that Alcoholics Anonymous is the only place I have ever come to find sobriety, and that's because I am an alcoholic. I was, when I became physically addicted to heroin, I stopped drinking alcohol, and that made me confused about what I was. And even more than that, I was exposed to the treatment world from the time I was, right before I was 9 years old, when my sister went into that treatment facility. And I knew what Alcoholics Anonymous was, and I knew that Alcoholics Anonymous was the place you came to where you never got to drink again. I knew from my many meetings, my many AA meetings that I got sent to, that you guys said that you did this one day at a time, but I knew that was hogwash. Because what you really meant was you can't ever drink again, ever, ever. And so I knew that if I was alcoholic, I would never be able to drink again. And certainly since I got physically addicted to heroin, I didn't need to drink anymore. And I had many people ask me from time to time whether I was an alcoholic, and I would say, no, I don't even drink. And thankfully, when I ended up finally getting sober, a woman asked me to do an inventory, and it was in that inventory that I finally had to admit the way that I drank. The way alcohol had an effect on me when I was 4, the way I drank when I was 11, the way, and I started to identify with the disease of alcoholism, also listening to speakers and reading our book, Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm so grateful I stuck a needle in my arm that night, because I found sobriety when I was 21 years old. And I don't think I would have ended up here but for the use of those hard drugs, because what happened for me is I got scared, and I moved back down to D.C. to spend time with my family. And then I thought, well, I started bartending at a club in D.C., and then I thought, one more time, well, that's stupid. I don't know why I quit heroin altogether. My life is working out just fine now. I know what I did last time, and I just need not repeat that same performance, but I could do it once in a while. And I started shooting heroin, and thankfully I was going to get the heroin every day because most of the time I got laundry detergent. Because like I said, I was like this 5'4", 112-pound little 19-year-old redhead girl, and I would drive into Southeast DC and look for those groups of guys that looked like they looked in New York City, and so most of the time I got laundry detergent from them. So I had to keep going back every day because I didn't actually get it the day before. It didn't count, and and it's a good thing because I found out that I was 2 months pregnant, and I had probably been shooting heroin about twice a week during that period of time, and for the second time in my life, I knew that this baby was the solution I was looking for, and I quit doing everything. And my doctor asked me, I was honest with my doctor. My doctor asked me if I needed help, and I said, no, I don't need any help if I ever think about drinking again. No, I want a healthy baby. I knew that this little girl was going to love me with all her heart. I was going to love her with all my heart, and this relationship we had was going to be the thing that fixed my gut. And that worked out for a few months, but one night I went back to shooting heroin because that's what, I know when everything in my life goes wrong, I know what takes the pain away like that. And for me, that's a shot of heroin. And my doctor busted me, and I had to go on methadone, or they told me they would remove my daughter from my custody once she was born. And my daughter was born a few months later, and I watched her detox in the neonatal intensive care unit for 16 days. And that did not get me sober. I thought it would. I thought the memory of seeing my daughter shake in that little plastic tub would do it. But when she was released from the hospital, I was dragging her in and out of crack houses within 3 days. And I spent the first 9 months of her life, I would just disappear into Southeast, or actually part of Northeast DC, really. And I would just disappear for weeks and then go home to my mother and then disappear and go home. And I knew that my mother knew every time I disappeared what it was I was doing. And I started working for an escort service, and they let me go one day because my clients complained because I had track marks. They have standards at those places, and I was staying with this junkie woman, Tawana, and her brother Buttons was a pimp. She said, it's not a problem, we'll just page Buttons, and you can go out to work on the street for him, which was quite a relief for me because coming off that methadone, I needed $200 to get straight, and I was a little nervous about where I was going to get that money from. And I went out one night, and the first car I got into, I had an argument with my prospective client. It was about price because I felt like I had just come from an escort service. I was kind of a high dollar girl. He felt like I had been on the street corner. I was kind of a low dollar girl. We couldn't come to an agreement, and I guess the police that were waiting behind got tired of waiting because they went ahead and put their lights on and asked me to step out of the vehicle. And they let me go that night, but they told me if they saw me on the street again, they'd arrest me on sight. And I went home, and Buttons said he would send someone to take care of me, but he didn't do that. And at 7:15 in the morning, I knew my mom was about to leave for work. And I was too ashamed to talk to her, but I called her, and when she answered the phone, all I said was, if you bring me $20, I'll let you have the baby. And she was more than happy to do that. And my daughter was placed with a family that could take care of her from that time on. And I went back out on the streets one more time, and I ended up down on the block in Baltimore where the strip clubs there have back rooms for the customers to take the girls. And I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I read that in Chapter 3, I heard you all read Pitiful and Incomprehensible Demoralization. And the hair on my arm stood up because I knew I had that experience. I got sober really kind of on a lark. I didn't want to get sober. I just wanted custody of my daughter back. And there was a bed available at a facility that took mothers and babies, and I entered that facility. And I stayed there for a year, and I got out. And just as luck would have it, I showed up one night to hear a speaker at this thing, and it was Sandy Beach, and I had heard him somewhere before, and he had made me laugh. And I hated AA, but I remembered he had made me laugh once when I was in a detox. And so I showed up, and that's all she wrote, really. I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got this home group appointed themselves to me, really, and this woman said she would be my sponsor, and I hated her. I still do, for that matter. But it was what I needed at the time. countless inventories. Anyway, she would tell me things like I needed to go to a meeting every day. I would say things like, I have a baby, I can't go to a meeting every day. And she would say, I didn't ask your opinion. She made me take these actions. My life started, my life really did get better right away. Unfortunately, I kept a lot of secrets in my sobriety. I went back to work for the escort service because I was sober. Now I could. And it didn't make any sense to me why I would make $6.50 an hour when I could make $200. And, I didn't want to run that one by my sponsor because I knew what she would tell me with her limited experience. I found out in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that when I take actions like that the problem for me, I had it logically worked out in my head why it was okay to take certain actions. But the truth is that I experienced so much self-loathing, I needed a drink to numb the way I felt about myself. And that is not what I was expecting. So I finally had to tell somebody the truth. And I'll tell you, my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous started to change right away, because up and until that time, and I was almost 2 years sober, up and until that time, I would cry all the time. I was just self-pity, and I was just a pathetic mess in every meeting and just draining. And people would just, they wouldn't even talk to me anymore. And thank God, because I didn't need somebody to console me and pat me on the back. They would go tell me to go pick up trash or something. And that is definitely what I needed to do. The one thing that was missing in my life was a relationship with God, though. And I had started work the steps. I started to sponsor people. I know from the time I was about 11, I lost that feeling of that connection with God that I had when I was little. And I just, I thought maybe there's a God, maybe not, but I'll never know. And you can't give me God. Like, you can't tell me there's a God. You can tell me you believe in God. My mother had the most faith of any person I've ever known, but I thought her faith was ridiculous. I knew she needed it, but I thought it was ridiculous, and I knew I could never feel God. And I took a trip out here to California, and it's actually when I visited the Pacific group for the first time. I was 2.5 years sober, and I fell in love with that group and said, I'm going to move out there and be a member of that group, which in fact I have done since. Coming back from that trip, I was on a layover, and when they called my airplane, I stood up really quickly and accidentally hit myself in the eye with my boarding pass. And what happened is I clipped off some of my cornea, and but it's usually not a big deal, but mine got infected, and before long I had an ulcer in my eye. I had necrotizing bacteria, and it felt like all the time like somebody was sticking a hot poker in my eye. It was just, I was experiencing an unbearable amount of pain. And there was a period of time I was seeing doctors at Johns Hopkins, and for over a month I had to put eye drops in my eye every half an hour, 24 hours a day. And so I didn't get 29 minutes of sleep for more than a month. I was crazy. And I didn't ever have to set an alarm clock to wake me up every half an hour because I couldn't sleep 30 minutes for the pain anyway. And there was one Saturday evening, I would just go every day. I'd have to sit in the eye doctor till they could squeeze me in somewhere. And I remember I got out late one Saturday night, and that eye doctor had told me, he said, Yvonne, there's nothing more we can do for you. 50-50, you're going to lose that eye altogether in the next week. And I was just devastated. And I just wanted somebody to just give me an answer. And my mom, she had to drive me all the time. I was having a hard time driving, and she was driving me to my home group that night, and I decided on the way there that the next day I was going to go get a bag of heroin, not because I didn't want to be sober, but because I needed something to just take the edge off. And that night at my meeting, somebody sat me down and gave me some unsolicited advice. She told me that I needed to go home and pray for the removal of the obsession I had with my eye, and I have never been so angry at anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous than I was at her that night. I tried to explain that it was not an obsession. Actually, I thought it. I didn't say it because she scared me, but in my head I was trying to explain that it wasn't really an obsession, that there was a physical problem that doctors at Johns Hopkins had no answer for, but I'm sure you do. But I went home that night, and after a couple of hours, I finally got down on my knees. And to my memory, I've never prayed before in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really didn't see the point of getting on my knees and praying to nothing. And I missed that part, and Scarlett talked about it. But what it says and how it works is that God could and would if he were sought. And I never knew that. I thought I had to find God to have the miracle of God working in my life. I did not realize that all I had to do was seek God. And if you had pointed that out to me, I wouldn't have believed you anyway. I got down and I prayed for the removal of the obsession I had with my eye with no faith whatsoever. And I got back into bed and I fell asleep. But this time I didn't wake up for about 6 hours. And when I woke up, most of the pain was gone. And on Sunday, I would always see the on-call surgeon on Sunday that was making rounds, and it was the same doctor who had seen me the night before, and he had no medical explanation for the healing that had occurred in my eye overnight. And I'll tell you that I developed a relationship with God that day. And that was my greatest gift that I've ever gotten in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I also learned my greatest lesson that day, too. And that was that I thought that was the worst thing. I was about to lose my sobriety over the pain that I was in. I felt like it was unfair. I was doing everything I was asked to do now. I'm working so hard. Why is this happening to me? As if I'm entitled to something other than sobriety because I'm taking the right actions. I forget sometimes that sobriety is the gift I'm looking for. What I thought was the worst thing for me, I received my greatest gift, a relationship with God. So really, who am I to judge what's good or bad in my life at any given time? And what that's been able to do for me in my sobriety since then is that when I experience pain, and I still experience pain, I know enough now to sit through it, and that I tell myself, oh, Yvonne, remember the last time you thought it was the worst thing, you got your greatest gift. So now I know that if I just sit through it for now, that I get to look back over a space of years, or, hopefully, and then I see that inevitably, my life has gone the way I would have wanted it to. I just didn't know it in the moment. And I've had a somewhat of a tough year. Actually, now it's easing up. But I did lose my sight in that eye. I had a second corneal transplant like a year ago. And for one thing, I had to go on a lot of immunosuppressant drugs for 15 months, including a high dose of prednisone. And I gained like 80 pounds in 4 months, despite the fact I was training for a marathon, running like 30 to 40 miles a week, which I really felt was unfair. But it's funny. Her sponsor, Millie, she's my AA sister. Mary and Wallene is my sponsor. And when I first put on all this weight, I thought, you know what, I can't go to meetings until I lose it again. It's just too humiliating. But then I thought, why don't you run that one by Marion? If you know Marion, I mean, it's not, no. I thought, no, it's just easier to go to meetings. And I'll tell you, it hasn't, and it didn't work out. I lost the sight again. It didn't work out. But but it's all right. Now, I know I've had depressing, whatever. It's all right. My life is, I'll tell you, my life already, who cares about the sight really, or the weight, or any of that, and I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier saying this to you. I don't mind coming up here and telling you all what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, because it does two valuable things for me. One, it reminds me exactly where it was that my drinking took me, and the other thing is it reminds me of all the great gifts I have in my life instead of the things that I don't have today. And I had the incredible opportunity to go back to school when I was sober. I started with community college and found that when I actually do my homework and stuff, I get straight A's. And after 2 years of community college, I got an academic scholarship to George Washington University. And I graduated from GW 2 years later, first in my field. And my mother was on the White House lawn watching me graduate with my daughter in her lap. And I'll tell you, that's priceless. And my mother was diagnosed with cancer shortly after that and died soon after. And my mother once told me, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. My mother once told me before she died, she said, before you got to Alcoholics Anonymous, you were so hard and cold, and now you are so soft. And that may not mean a lot to anyone else, but it means a lot to me that my mother my mother who waited outside in the car with my baby, you know, while I went in and got a fix in the ghetto, that she knew her granddaughter was safe with me. I cannot repay Alcoholics Anonymous for that one thing by itself. And I'll tell you that my mom lived long enough to see me start law school. It's a parallel world where I come from to going to law school. I went to a very conservative law school in Northern Virginia, and I sat there the first day and thought, I know I'm the only junkie hooker here. But I didn't say that out loud. You know, and since I graduated law school, I got the opportunity to move out here, where I'm a member of the Pacific Group, an active member, and I have a sponsor there. And I passed the California bar a couple of years ago, and I work in a law firm where my boss was telling me just a couple weeks ago that there is one thing he can depend on me for, it is being ethical. I thought, if he only knew. I'll tell you, everything that I have in my life. Oh, wait, because I know I'll get the question. That little girl of mine is 12 years old. She's 12. That's how I can describe her. She's 12. But she has no apparent ill effects. I'm saving her a seat, but she's normal in every alcoholic regard. And Alcoholics Anonymous, my home is the hardest place for me to bring Alcoholics Anonymous to, but with your help, I get better at that little by little. And everything that I have today is a direct result of the actions I've been asked to take in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have you to thank.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious. Do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.